You're tuned in to Reimagine 2021, version 11, the #1 virtual crypto and blockchain conference. In this next segment, our expert speakers discuss the various positives of using DAOs.
People are used to working 9 to 5 and having these types of jobs, but how do you see DAOs disrupting the future of the workforce?
DAOs are probably stretching the remote work lifestyle even farther, and it's already been doing that before the pandemic, I would say. I think the thing that I tend to find with maybe the vendors that I speak with who aren't necessarily in crypto, you remember the phase early on in COVID where people were like, oh, like, this is such a new norm, not used to this remote work, it's so crazy to stare at a screen all the time. And with crypto, it's actually not that foreign of a concept. The previous company I was at prior to Ava Labs, there was also engineers living in Alaska. There was an engineer living, I think, somewhere in Europe and all over the world. And how we would collaborate is we would just hop on a video chat, and that's how we did it. And I think the touch points existed in person, where maybe on an annual or like quarterly basis, where you're just trying to celebrate that connection and basically kind of like a social gathering, just to make sure that you can not only have that virtual connection, but of course the physical one. So what it's basically done is, first of all, propelled it forward, and then I think the coordination is also necessary. How do you have governance calls? That's something that's very new. Governance calls for a lot of these projects. I know Aave is also another project that's structured like a DAO. They exist on a weekly cadence or even more frequent. And so that makes the touch points more important. And also a lot of the community members will tune into those things. And they'll say, hey, well, this is really important for me because I get to listen in on what's the future of this project. And I should also participate as someone who speaks up in those things. And then at the end, it's like, well, how do we implement a vote? Well, anyone can have a proposal. And when you have a proposal, it's also a marketable event. You have, let's say you're project A and you have an integration that wants to come in. Well, how it works is you have the project come in and they submit a proposal, and it has to be pretty detailed, because if you push something that's just a few lines or something that you didn't put work into, then you're not getting the confidence of the community and you might not have the vote pass. The second piece is then the marketing, I think. How do you raise hype and awareness for this new thing that you're about to implement into this project, and how does it provide value to those users? If you're able to address both, where it's have the strong proposal and the business case, and then also then kind of the community and marketing awareness, then I think it usually pans out to something positive. And that's where I think what I'm most excited about with DAOs is, how does this coordination extend beyond what I'm describing now? There's probably other ways to make this more efficient and more engaging, and I think that's maybe the metaverse has a play in it. Maybe you have DAO governance calls. I don't necessarily want to use the Facebook Oculus product, but maybe there's another VR headset where you're just simply sitting in your own room, and it almost feels like we're talking face to face. But again, it's just kind of all these people around the world trying to contribute.
So, yeah, it's different. Probably it's a more direct way to coordinate for people. In the sense, it could be like. So it could be different, like opposite to current some corporate structures. So yeah, in the sense, there is like some corporations or like legal structures that could be replaced by the DAO. Yeah, in this sense, it's kind of disrupting this some industries, I guess. Maybe one of like in top of my head, so it's some charity could be disrupted, because you maybe it's easier to have a DAO maybe to collect funds and distribute, rather than doing this and some, I don't know how it's like non-profit organizations, legal entities.
The future global economy, the thing that DAOs do amazingly well is it opens up a path to profitability, a path to sustainability, a path to income and wealth creation for people who historically never had that. You can be anywhere in the world that has a fairly reliable internet connection and be part of a DAO and have an income that's equivalent to somebody who's working in Laramie, Wyoming, right? And maybe Laramie is not the most wealthy town in the United States, but the average income there is higher than it would be in some of the developing worlds. So being able to give that access to be able to do the work and take what is unique and powerful about the individual, wherever they are in the world, and allow them to reach beyond what their birth circumstances may have put them in. That is what the power, that is the thing that I love about DAOs. It can really lift the entire world and break these traditional bonds of serfdom, debt, of shackling to financial institutions that are the gatekeepers to saying, yes, you are wealthy enough to be part of my bank, or no, I'm not giving you a loan for that because you haven't borrowed money from me in the past, which is how the credit system works. That's a powerful, powerful tool.
What traditional business models do you think will die off?
As a result of DAOs, traditional business models that will die off because of, that's an excellent question. And honestly, I'm not sure because I haven't really thought through it carefully. I know there are a bunch of business models that are parasitic in essence, right? They're the ones who are trying to put more trust into a system, make sure that you can trust where your real estate title is held and the fact that there are no liens against it. But traditional crypto has, and traditional blockchain has solutions for these other aspects. When it comes to a DAO formation itself, I think it'll very much disrupt some of the independent contracting universe, first and foremost. Because they become independent contractors across the board, and so this DAO formation ends up being a stronger model for that. Beyond that, I would actually love to see content creation be really disrupted through DAOs. The ability of a group of people where you have your filmographer, you have your artist, you have your lighting, you have all of the various different components of creating content are all part of a DAO, and they shift in and out and in and out, and so you no longer have that massive overhead structure. And so all of the value comes back to the creators, all the value comes back to the talent, and they're crowdsourcing this, and so the financing comes back to them as well. And that, I think, is massively disruptive.
For internet collectives and groups of people that maybe work remotely or in like a tech space, or trying to set up a project surrounding something that makes sense in the digital space, I think they represent like a really interesting kind of structure, especially if you start like factoring in like other company structures into like that sort of ideology and like framework for your DAO. I think like affecting the workforce as a whole, I think a lot of industries won't be affected by DAOs, or like DAOs might just not make sense. Like most companies are hyper centralized and don't need to be community owned, or maybe the founders or like the goals have different ideologies on like how a company should be run. But like maybe like real world co-ops, or maybe social causes, or maybe like art collectives or galleries, or like things like that, that are more like community centric, not really like one head person kind of controlling the whole thing. Maybe DAOs represent a great opportunity for like shared and collective like value and wealth, for something that people are building together. Or maybe it incentivizes people to feel like they own a piece of the company coming in without having to have like all sorts of the like regular corporation kind of structures and like rule books.
It might just give you a base community, a strong base rather, off the bat. Because I think the biggest issues that startups have, maybe non-crypto ones, is they tend to focus on just the product and then marketing on a one-way approach, not a multi-directional approach. So when you go, okay, well I have this new physical product that might revolutionize people who drive cars. Well, let's just start selling that to them and see if it sticks, right? With crypto brands, you go, well, who's the community manager? How are we going to effectively capture these interested people into, first and foremost, a digital space, but ideally also a physical space. So maybe local meetups, local events, things where you have that emotional touch point, because we are human at the end of the day. We can't possibly just be purely digital, no matter how much maybe some of my counterparts might say that might be the future. And so this kind of robust community, and then maybe also this new approach and mindset where you're saying, all right, well, we can't just suppress the negative comments by blocking them or just disabling comments. We have to let them come in and out. Otherwise, that community is not going to feel like they're heard, and you're going to have a ton of issues long term, as you're going to look back and say, well, how come we have 100,000 people in this community, but it seems like they're really disparate and does not really feel like it's in unison. And that's kind of where if you take shortcuts, you might not have that really healthy community.
So anything where there's a desire for community ownership, take a partnership that was set up to buy assets. You've seen DAOs set up to buy digital art, NFTs. That's a really interesting way of structuring fractional ownership. You can see applications across any form of partnership. The world I live in, the venture capital space, there should probably be a DAO that exists to do venture capital deals. Maybe I should set one up. And I think that will indeed occur. Maybe it already has and I'm not even aware. I think DAOs have the potential to replace any form of corporate structure or legal structure, an LLP, an LLC, or a corporation. And so every industry has the potential to be disrupted by this technology. And digital ownership of assets, distributed or decentralized, I think is a powerful trend. And I always ask people, name a technology that came along that made things better, that then went back in the bottle, right? I was getting off the plane this morning and chatting with somebody in front of me, and my grandfather-in-law left a safe job with the train company to go work for the upstart American Airlines. His parents were horrified, and everybody thought, that's a fad, and you shouldn't go there, and why would we want to do that? Like, well, air travel is faster and more efficient than train travel. In fact, King Leopold, I guess, from Russia once said, supposedly, that why would anyone need a train and pay money to go someplace in an hour when they could easily ride a horse in a day for free? Like an hour versus a day on a horse? Are you kidding me? That's a long time. So lots of trains in Europe, lots of good trains in Europe. No good trains here. So I do think that DAOs have the potential to disrupt all kinds of industries. I think they're going to start in the places where the original creators are comfortable. So around tech, around NFTs, around digital property rights, but it will eventually extend into just about everything.
Disrupting, again, like we talked about earlier, there's some legal issues with these things now. I think DAOs are just starting, and it's going to be coming this year. And I want to go back to the metaverse again. I really think that the metaverse should emerge. Emerge is a very key term, as a DAO, and then this DAO should exist across ecosystems, like multi-chain, probably easiest thing to do is anything that's an Ethereum compatible chain. It's like for example, like Conflux, if want to interact with the Chinese populace, there's certain you have the DAO is deployed on Conflux too, so Chinese people can interact with it, and then Ethereum in the West, and so there's this bridge between people communicating and collaborating together. Again, super important, because if we want to decentralize, or if we want the world to really benefit, and we want decentralized communities, it's got to be everyone participating in however way they can, based upon their jurisdiction, of course, in collaborating together in some way.
How do DAOs rebalance the power?
The power to the people. And again, saying shareholders here, anyone can kind of come into a DAO. Of course, when you create a DAO, there's some centralization, because you got to get the concepts together. But as long as the vision, the roadmap is to open it up to the general public, anyone can join. That's the beauty of it. And it goes back to legal and jurisdictions, of course, too, and whatnot. But no matter what, even with the VPN, if for some reason your jurisdiction doesn't particularly allow it, you can be somewhat anonymous, go through a VPN and access a DAO and then gain benefit.
And how do you think DAOs are going to affect the future of the workforce?
Okay, we've talked about a lot of legal things. Okay, so the legal things need to be in place. First, I want to say in different jurisdictions, but I think another huge hurdle is the decentralized ID or DID, whatever you want to call it. They're quantifying who someone says they are. However, people should be able to remain somewhat anonymous within a DAO, but they have their credentials on chain, protected on chain in some way. So you can even use zero knowledge proofs to this person is who they say they are, but they don't have to give away their identity. Maybe they're in a country that with a a dystopian government or something like that, and they don't want them interacting with it, so they can still be anonymous and interact with a DAO, be protected via on chain, remain anonymous, be protected via on chain because zero knowledge proofs, and those kind of things.
Looking forward, what are some things that you think DAOs still have to figure out and ways that DAOs can still disrupt organizations out there?
Again, kind of going back to it's really legal right now, so DAOs have to figure out, again, working within different jurisdictions and different legal structures, and it's also decentralized IDs. So you have a legal infrastructures, and then how people trust who they say who the counterparty is or whomever they're dealing with in these DAOs. So the two really, I think, big hurdles in my opinion now that are going to be fixed pretty soon. I know there's a lot of DID research right now. I can't remember the company, but I was reading CoinDesk earlier this morning. I think one company raised close to $10 million for DID. So it's coming, definitely. And so we're almost there. And then with this class I'm facilitating at University of Washington, definitely bringing legal students in, political science students in to kind of figure out we're not going to solve everything obviously, but it's really jumping points of thought for other people to take a hold of and then maybe come up with solutions.
How will DAOs affect the ownership economy?
Yeah, geez, we can go back to community, the commons, but how people affect the commons, the common ownership of goods. You kind of see that almost I want to say in the gig economy today, or just the subscription economy kind of things. And I think, but subscription economy is really controlled by centralized authorities. People can even using the term of idle assets again, people can share things a lot more via DAOs if they have so instead of just you have the idle computer part over there and someone want to buy that to build their own computer, maybe people can collectively put things together, idle assets together, for the benefit of the DAO. So they need servers or whatever, these kind of stuff, and they can collectively put together these things and have the benefit for everyone involved in the DAO.
I'm really interested in how DAOs could disrupt the music industry and with gaming. So with music, something that I'm really interested in is right, and I'm not an expert in the music industry, but I kind of know a little about the role that labels play, for example, in terms of determining the song that gets put out, the arc of an artist, or in terms of radio distribution. Now it's probably a little less important, but then it's the rank of something on a Spotify playlist. It determines how often people will click on a song, and there's a lot of things that are so designed for people to become interested in a song and to stay attuned to a song. I think what would be really interesting for DAOs is instead of going through labels, for artists to then submit their samples or completed songs for a DAO to vote on for which one should be the song that they should announce next, or the song that they need to edit on. And so instead of people being at the label, being the tastemakers in a sense, it's now turned over to the community where you have this amazing group of people that's coming all over the world who will not only get to decide what an artist gets to do and what an artist wants to do and help an artist in terms of shaping their art, their music, but also really be involved in the entire creation process and be able to benefit from the artists and the musicians' work once it's been released. I think Friends with Benefits has done a really great job with this in terms of some of the NFT series that they released, but I would be really interested to see what it could do to the world of music and also what it could do to the world of gaming in terms of development.
I'd have to say finance, because that's the biggest, I'd say, use case till date for cryptocurrencies. So we're seeing decentralized exchanges, decentralized fund management coming out, and that's, I guess, the first industries that we'll see get disrupted. But we're seeing the same thing probably with NFTs and other digital native kind of ecosystems. And so, we could see media getting disrupted through something like this. It's really opens up the possibilities to a lot of exciting things coming out of it.
So getting into that a bit, how do you think DAOs can streamline ownership of digital assets?
At the end of the day, if we go back to some of the early phrases in crypto, one of the earliest is not my coins, or not my keys, not my coins. We don't hear it very much anymore, but not my keys, not my coins. And what that means is you have to have a personal responsibility about your own wealth, right? And so when you talk about ownership and when you talk about working in a community, all of these members of these DAOs all understand, very, very first thing they understand is personal accountability and personal responsibility. And so they come into a DAO and they say, okay, what we're gonna do as a group is we're gonna create value and we're gonna capture that. But then everybody in that DAO, through selection bias, all believe in personal accountability and all believe in being able to follow through on what you're doing and own your mistakes and own your productive capability, your productive capital. And that, you're already setting yourself up for success because no one is there that does not understand what it means to be responsible. And I think that has a massive amount of power.
What industries do you think will get impacted due to the permissionless nature of DAOs?
I mean, obviously, this is very general, but every industry, is going to be affected. I think it's going to be social, first, and there's really a hunkering down from this. I want to say everyone in the world that they really wanted to disrupt social. You shouldn't have just Facebook driving people's political agendas and this kind of stuff, but you guys should kind of go back to the DAOs. DAOs may not necessarily be they may be free for alls too. So there'll be DAOs that will push agendas and DAOs that won't push agendas. But people are collective animals. They want to come together around something, and I think it is social and communication and idea creation that's going to drive blockchain adoption this next year. DeFi last year, it's going to be social. DAOs this year really driving mainstream adoption of blockchain.
I'm not sure if I'd agree that it's easier to form a legal DAO because I think that space is also a very exploratory phase, right? And I think Wyoming is kind of trying to start that, but there are not many previous examples. So I think a lot of people want to have legalized DAOs, but the pathway is unclear. But I do think eventually, yes, it will become that where it's going to be easier to form a DAO, and then it's going to be easier to operate as a DAO. And obviously there are the benefits of running a DAO. So I do think that's going to be kind of basically a substitute for running a company for things that make sense, right? Obviously not everything makes sense to be a DAO, but for things that make sense, it will opt in to create a DAO that's in a legal fashion, basically.
And do you see other types of businesses, companies reversing into DAOs?
That's going to be a pretty interesting one. Generally, no, I don't think so, because it's the way you have to think about it as a DAO versus a company. And the reason why I'm generally not bullish on existing corporates running a blockchain project or a DAO project is because as a company, you typically think about as a for-profit entity, right? You have to, how do you maximize the shareholders' value, fiduciary duty, right? Versus DAOs, the goal is not about how do you generate the most profit for this DAO? That's typically not how DAOs are formed, what the goal of the DAO is. So just the interest alignment and the objective of the organization is kind of structured a little bit differently. So I kind of don't think most companies will be able to successfully transition over to a DAO. One kind of setup or structure that makes sense for DAOs, I think, is co-ops. Co-ops, I think, actually are existing kind of structure that actually has a lot of similarities to DAO. And I think I can see a lot of those actually being converted into DAOs in general.
DAOs are indeed going to break so many of the processes and concepts that we are used to as a large enterprise. So typically everything we do between a buyer and seller at the large enterprise scale is done under an NDA. But with a DAO, who's the client? Who is approving it? If the stakeholders are voting on the proposal, you've got to make it public. And if the stakeholders are going to assess the outcome of the work you did for them, you're going to have to make that public. So it's going to change how we do business. It's going to subject the work that we do to a much higher level of scrutiny. And it's going to also cause us to think about, what does this mean if I do work for somebody and it gets paid for and then it becomes public? How does that affect my ability to sell similar types of work to other parties as well?
And you're pretty much answering the innovation of the landscape, business models, everything kind of coming full head of steam here. Why? Why does EY want to take on a DAO as a client with all the fascinations, as you just mentioned? What's the drive there to actually kind of pivot, or not pivot, but allow a DAO to now be a client?
DAOs are exciting because I think they might be a path to solving what is one of the oldest problems in kind of capitalism and economics, which is often talked about as the principal agent problem, right? The principal, the owner of a business, is not necessarily the same as the agent, the organization that runs it. And sometimes the agents, the people who run the organization, spend more time serving themselves than the owners of the business. DAOs are decentralized. They have a high level of sort of true stakeholder democracy and engagement, and they operate in many cases with a much higher level of public service. They're almost a blend between a traditional corporation and a digital cooperative or a nonprofit. So I think DAOs will create a new era of highly competitive public services. I think they have a chance to represent what owners want done with their capital in a way that's much more effective. And I think that they will fund a tremendous amount of public innovation. We're already seeing DAOs with their public goods funding, with innovation funding. I think trying to make DAOs work and create a better digital ecosystem will just be an incredibly exciting and rewarding challenge for us.
Why do you think people are attracted to DAOs? You gotta be committed. You know, these DAOs there's active participation, there's members, there's core members. Why do you think these individuals and are attracted to DAOs and want to contribute to a DAO?
So I think one, people are intellectually stimulated by it because, and two, I think they believe in the future of DAOs. I think DAOs will run, our sports teams of the futures will be DAOs. Our schools and universities will be DAOs. Our healthcare systems will be DAOs. Businesses and marketplaces will be DAOs. And so even our governments potentially, and in very long-term view, and like hundreds of years. And so I think people see what can happen, and what it is a better way of organizing people and creating rules. And the other reason, the last reason why they're so exciting, why I'm so excited about them, is because you actually can bring power to the users and workers, which centralized competitors cannot compete with DAOs, because DAOs are really, the entire spirit of them is that they're decentralized and autonomous.
Do you think traditional companies can reverse into a DAO? I mean, there's a couple teams right now. They're in the crypto space already, so maybe that kind of helps. But do you see some centralized, maybe not the big players, but deconstructing themselves or being a part of them, supporting them?
Yeah, I don't think you can take a Delaware C Corp and make it fully turn into a DAO. But what will happen is a lot of centralized companies are going to say, hey, by us giving up control over this piece of our business and letting the users govern and control it, we're going to get far more growth. So it's counterintuitive for them because they get weaker in terms of their ability to control. But then what they do is they gain the ability to influence. And when they give up control and they give more power back to the users, they'll actually get more business in the end. And so I think there'll be a little bit of this, this hybridized model that takes DAOs to the next level and actually takes blockchain to the next level.
It's early, but there'll be a push button one day where it's like if you're GitHub and you're a programmer, you can clone a repo, or you can just copy a file. It's going to be like that for starting a new DAO. You'll just effectively clone an existing one that you like. Maybe you tweak the parameters a little bit because you want to, but it'll get really easy.
It's going to be like a DAO starter kit.
I think a lot of it will be kind of figured out by these DAO frameworks, right? These DAO as a service type of things, right? They're already thinking about a lot of the considerations, right? We work pretty closely with this DAO called Coordinape. They do a lot of things for Yearn and Curve and a lot of these DeFi protocols. And what Coordinate allows you to do is ascribe or attribute points based on someone's contributions, right? And using that framework, they then deliver value to the people that have contributed, right? But that's just very bare bones layer 1 DAO, right? Even embedding, subjective feelings or things that are not as prescriptive or measurable, this is like where the next evolution of DAOs, I think, will come from, right? But DAOs are tools. DAOs are tools. They need the right resources to fuel them. But it's the purest form of finding people that believe in the same thing and allowing them to collaborate, right?
What are some interesting projects or companies that you see are effectively using DAOs for coordination?
One that comes to mind immediately is Shapeshift. Shapeshift started, Eric Voorhees obviously is super bullish on this technology. He's been pretty much one of the largest figures since the beginning. I think one of the things that I found interesting, especially as I have peers in that company and people that have gone through this process, is it wasn't a DAO from day one. I think perhaps also because Shapeshift predates the idea of a DAO, perhaps. I think that's my best guess there. But now I think the last year or so, they have fully transitioned into a DAO. And the first question I asked some of my friends there is saying, well, how does that work? Imagine if you have a company meeting and you say, well, hey, I know this is like the day-to-day and this is what you've known to love, but we're gonna totally squash this, and actually some of you might not even have a role here anymore because of how it's structured, and here's the timeline and here's how we're gonna get to that final goal, where then all of a sudden the people that are participating in Shapeshift are the token holders, not any centralized entity that can have a larger, or I guess, larger voice than those holders. And so I think the thing that's fascinating about that is not so much the implementation of it, but how they got there. It was like, apparently there was a lot of communications, it was basically a leap of faith. There are certain people that may not have necessarily bought into that, I'm sure, but there's also plenty of people that did, and that was really what was shocking, the success of the narrative of saying, hey, like, this is something that is obviously a risk, doesn't happen often in this space, but here's why you should be excited about it, and here are the things that are the benefits of doing this, and hopefully you can take a leap of faith with us as a whole community, and here's to the future type of narrative.
I think that DAOs are really insane. I'm also a newcomer in terms of learning about DAOs, so definitely a student. And but one of my favorite DAOs is the FWB DAO, Friends with Benefits. I always have to explain to people that it's a DAO, and then I need to go into what a DAO is about because the name is so interesting. But Friends with Benefits is named with ideas it's like friends supporting each other, creatives who are benefiting from each other's relationships. So I actually think the name is very apt. It's just that people hear Friends with Benefits and they think, like, why are you in that? So for Friends with Benefits, it's a group of creatives, of musicians, artists, people in the NFT space, people who are traders, who have all come together to facilitate amazing conversation and also offer advice and support each other as we discover Web3. It's really insane. I think they just announced a huge fundraising round that was completed by, I think that was led by A16Z with Pace Capital and Kindred Capital participating. And I think the central ethos of FWB is just people coming together and people benefiting from not just the conversations, but also being able to participate in a lot of the decisions that are made in the DAO. For example, for Friends with Benefits, you need 75 tokens to join in order to be a full member. And that is pretty pricey. That's almost $10,000 now, or maybe even more. I haven't checked in a couple of days. But that value is going to appreciate further, as new people want to join Friends with Benefits, as new people hear about the mission of Friends with Benefits and everything that they're accomplishing. So I think this is a case where the community is benefiting alongside the rise of the brand value for Friends with Benefits. And on the other hand, there are a lot of really cool in-person events. They have a New York sub-DAO where you can go to the New York Watering Hole, and they have weekly events where people actually meet in person and chat with each other. And it's definitely the Discord where I see the most active members and where I've been in the most direct conversations with people, because people within the community are just so supportive and open to other people. One of the interesting things about DAO, it's that the power-making ability is taken out of these executives. So if you have a traditional company, you have the C-suite where maybe even as an employee, you don't really have a lot of decision or transparency into what's happening high level. With a DAO, a lot of these community proposals are coming in from the community. They're generated by the community. And so recently, one of the proposals that was passed for Friends with Benefits that I was totally in support of was to create a new tier of membership where if people just have 5 tokens, they're able to join the sub-DAOs and be a part of, let's say, the New York conversation and be able to come to the New York events. And I think that was really interesting to see, the types of voting mechanism, the people who are involved in voting, and the people who are looking to get involved in the DAO, not just for the conversation that's happening, but for the power that they have over the future of what's happening with the community. And I think that's something very special that a DAO can give that no other thing can give, just a completely community-led initiative. Obviously, a lot of DAOs, like when you start off, you have a smaller group and you need to have enough members and enough interest in order to become fully decentralized. But I think Friends with Benefits is one of the ones that I really believe in long term. And that's why I joined in as a member, and that's why I'm keeping my tokens, because I think that it's going to be something that's going to be long lasting and continuously create value for its members.
A couple that I've been involved in, one that's fun, right, is I joined something called League DAO, which is trying to recreate fantasy sports in a DAO first mentality. And that makes sense to me, right? If the participants in the league are generating the content, meaning the players and the teams and the prizes, why does a chunk of that go to a centralized organization just because they wrote the software, however many years ago? So a DAO organization, I think, is a superior model. So I like that. I think derivative markets are another one. So I've, again, personally invested in a couple things, Barnbridge Bond, and now Fiat DAO, which to me is an interesting use case of a DAO in that if you think about derivative contracts, smart contracts are better than people, right? If you get lost, do you stop and ask directions? No, you look at Google Maps or Apple Maps. In fact, in the South where I live, you would never stop and ask directions because they would say, go to where the oak tree was and take a left, and then go to where the general store was and I didn't live here 20 years ago. I don't know where the oak tree was. So we trust code. And so derivative contracts, I think, in a smart contract world are far superior. And to have a structure in a DAO where the members that get involved in those derivative markets have, again, ownership as opposed to a hierarchical organization taking all the profits, I think is just a better use case. And myriad other examples where DAOs could be used. We've seen one, Shark DAO, right? They buy nouns, which are NFTs. And that's kind of cool. So you can participate in the DAO. And then as these nouns get produced, one a day, they bid on them, and maybe they own them, maybe they don't. And maybe you own a fabulous collection of digital collectibles. That's one use case. So many applications like that. As I said, I think a DAO structure for a venture capital fund could be very interesting, or a DAO structure for asset management could be very interesting. At the end of the day, hierarchies were created to trickle up, right? All the wealth trickles up. This idea of trickle-down economics was a fallacy created to distract us from the trickle-up economics of the reality. And I think a decentralized world, a DAO-first world, really moves us toward more equality, more equity, more inclusiveness, and it's a big statement, but it's better for humanity, which sounds like drivel, but it's true. And there are lots of examples. ride sharing, right? I love ride sharing. I invested in Quadi before it became Didi, in Uber, in Lyft, in Ola, in Grab, and we've made lots of money for our investors. Love those companies. However, if you're a driver and I'm a rider, why do we give 30, 40% to the people that wrote the code years ago? We could have a decentralized version of that where we share in those profits. I think that's coming. And I think if you think about any model where there's a centralized authority taking a larger than normal share, a high profit margin, or monopolistic profit margins, it'll migrate to DAOs.
I know like several good DAOs, and one of them is pretty old one. It's like Metacartel, MCV, Metacartel Ventures. They're doing pretty good in terms of coordination, so it works for them. It's very old. I mean, in terms of DAO, it's kind of old. But there is a new one, like Nouns DAO, if you heard about this. It's a different approach. It's very cool because it's auctions for each NFT that gives you a vote. All the money goes to this treasury, and the cost of owning each NFT is like insane. I don't know, it looks like the lowest price is like several hundreds of dollars that these nouns are being sold. So that's why all the guys who are like entering the space, they have a pretty huge stake in this, and that's kind of push them to coordinate effectively. It's like another pretty cool approach. So this may be two things that I can think right off the top of my head.
Like Aave, like as an obvious example, some of the stuff they go like Aavegotchi, and if I pronounced that correctly, I'm not sure. But like it's a lot of DeFi now that we see again, and like and like Maker DAO, and like some of these things. There's a lot of like utilities financial, and a lot of the stuff right now in the DAOs. But they've like the thing about DeFi, there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, like Ponzi schemes like in DeFi and whatnot now. But we need that underlying infrastructure like for decentralized finance to move into like a social DAO, so there's some financial infrastructure so people can quantify their immaterial labor like within the social DAO and get paid for it, then have the fungibility to maybe take what they've earned within that DAO and then take it out, like again, going back to jurisdictions and legal things, like take it into like the real world essentially.
Are there any projects that you think are more effectively coordinated through a DAO?
I mean, I guess the one example I would use that I've seen executed really well from a community standpoint is like the Friends with Benefits group. I think they are a great example of a DAO, collective value, shared wealth, people coming in and contributing, building, like being like rewarded and incentivized from the DAO, like from the DAO's token, from equity within the company to feel like they're getting a piece for contributing. So I think that's probably one of the biggest success stories in like that space. I think there are a lot of other projects coming out where, you have like a DAO that's like earning a percentage of like royalties or like shared ownership of like the value generated from the group. You have like a lot of these like experimental NFT projects that are like creating DAOs around like a vault of NFTs that are owned and issuing a token that like has fractionalized value of the vault itself. Not sure how like legal or compliant that is, or like what jurisdictions can participate in those sorts of DAOs. But those are things that I think are really interesting and are being executed really well, especially when like things are kind of like still primitive in the DAO space. And I think the tools that are, I think Aragon and like a Gnosis Safe are like great tools for now to like set up like multi-sig wallets and like have like a DAO governance kind of structure. But I think there still needs to be a ton of innovation and like better and more accessible tools for like governance. I think most people use Snapshot right now. It's not perfect, but I think over time as the tools develop, I think people will come up with more innovative ways to develop DAOs.
Yeah, I think Shapeshift one was interesting, but I think that one was a little bit of an outlier because was like a crypto native company. So I can kind of see, Shapeshift founder always had a vision eventually to kind of decentralize their product and whatnot. But like I'm thinking more like, would Facebook ever turn into DAO, right? That it's a little bit harder for me to imagine, for example.